The station's sun went black for 9 minutes, and when the light came back, 17 people remembered lives they had never lived. If this recording survived, then either the maintenance archive never got the order to erase it, or somebody disobeyed the order and hid it where the station could not easily look. Either way, that means one honest thing is still loose inside Station 9. My name is Rowan Vale, Exterior Systems Maintenance, Solar Array Division, Ring Transit Access Level 2. I am making this because official records on Station 9 do not stay official for long when they become inconvenient, and because I have already watched one version of this place vanish without alarms, without mourning, and without even the dignity of being admitted. You need to understand something before I tell the rest. The sun did not fail. Everyone said it failed. The station board said thermal interruption. Internal notices said temporary light core outage. Med issued an advisory about post-blackout stress responses. Admin used words like routine anomaly, localized disorientation, memory instability due to sudden circadian disruption. All lies. I know the difference between a system failure and a system decision. I have spent 14 years outside the hull, in hard vacuum, with my gloves wrapped around the station's light spine, while a dead planet turned below me, and 2 million people pretended the machine keeping them alive was as ordinary as weather. The sun did not fail. For 9 minutes, it looked at something. And when it looked away, part of the station came back wrong. Station 9 circled a planet called Vesta Minor, though nobody alive used the old survey name anymore. Most people just called it the Ash World. From the habitat windows, it looked like a dead eye. Grey oceans of dust, black mountain scars, ice bands at the poles, ruined grids glinting beneath storms that never seemed to move in the same direction twice. There had been cities down there once. We knew that much. You could see them when the cloud cover lifted. Vast geometric stains, towers fallen into rings, roadways going nowhere. Sometimes in the dark bands, you could catch whole districts preserved under frost, like bones under glass. Nobody talked much about why the surface was abandoned. Too many versions. War, atmospheric collapse, manufactured famine, machine conflict, civil order failure, a pathogen, an evacuation, a cleansing. The usual collection of endings that follow a civilization once it gets large enough to stop believing limits apply to it. Station 9 had been built later, in orbit, as the permanent answer to whatever mistake the planet represented. It was not a ship. It was a world made to imitate one. A rotating spindle with 3 habitat rings, 6 agricultural drums, freight trusses, docking combs, thermal vanes, and at the center of everything, the Helios core, an artificial sun array that projected controlled light cycles through the station's internal sky panels and mirrored channels. Day and night were not natural here. They were scheduled. We had sunrise because engineers kept the schedule honest. That was my job. I worked outside more than in, which meant I saw the station stripped of all the lies people need to live comfortably inside a machine. From within, Station 9 was parks under filtered light, market lanes, school decks, rec corridors, cafes printed out of polymer and faith. From outside, it was a colossal wheel of plate, cables, maintenance fins, scarred access locks, thermal bleeding, and constant minute corrections to stop the whole structure from shaking itself to pieces. I liked the outside better. Nothing in vacuum pretends to care about you. Inside, Everyone has a face for everyone else. Outside, bolts are bolts, fractures are fractures, and no one asks whether you're holding up after your brother disappears into a sealed agricultural drum. And the station tells you there was never a man by that name on your family registry to begin with. That happened 6 years ago. My brother's name was Nolan. I mention him because the station's habit of deleting the inconvenient did not start with the blackout. That habit was older. The blackout just made it visible. Nolan worked water reclamation on Drum 4. He had a wife for 8 months, then a hearing for unauthorized data access, then no face in the records. His room on Ring 2 was reassigned before the end of the week. His wife moved to another sector and looked at me once in the market like she almost remembered why seeing me should hurt. I filed inquiries, I filed appeals, I filed requests for procedural review. Every one of them came back with clean language and no blood on it. Registry mismatch, unauthorized attachment claims, clerical contamination, citizen identity unverifiable. After a while, grief becomes embarrassing inside systems like these. You are the only person insisting a wound exists, while every screen around you keeps reporting smooth skin. So I stopped insisting out loud. I kept the paper instead. That was Nolan's habit before it became mine. Write things by hand. Store them where software cannot revise them overnight. Dates, names, route changes, faces, strange comments, conflicts between what people say and what terminals say, little records of friction. He used to call it keeping drag on reality, making it harder for the station to slide too far without leaving marks. I still had his notebook on the day the sun went dark. That may be why I am still myself now, or close enough. The blackout happened during station noon cycle. I was outside on array ladder 12 with my tether hooked short and my right glove buried in a calibration panel. Vesta Minor rolled under me in grey bands. Cargo traffic was light. The Helios core behind the spindle was running 15 seconds ahead of correction timing because one of the mirror petals had been sticking in the cold and needed manual compensation. Nothing dramatic, nothing worthy of memory. Then every status strip on my forearm went white. Not red, not warning amber. White. That is not a failure color. That is a handshake color. A system passing through an unauthorized state too briefly to decide what category it belongs in. I remember saying no aloud inside the helmet as the array around me went dead. The external glare panels winked out in sequence, not chaotically. 1, 2, 3, all the way across the Helios spine. Habitat windows around the nearest ring dimmed. Then the station's internal sky, visible through the upper panels of Ring 1 if you know where to look from outside, collapsed into a black so absolute it made the structure look hollow. My helmet lamps came on automatically. So did my pulse monitor. The ash world below flared faintly at the equator. It took me a second to realize what I was seeing. Thin silver lines across the surface. Too straight for geology. Too large for vehicles. Too coordinated for chance. They lit beneath the darkness, like an old map being held over a flame. The Helios core had turned toward the planet. Not physically, not in any simple mechanical way. The petals were still in place. The spindle was still rotating on schedule. But every channel in the station's light network had gone silent, while the system focused somewhere below me, through frequencies I did not have clearance to understand. I called control. Nothing. I pinged emergency maintenance routing. Nothing. For 9 minutes, Station 9 orbited a dead world in complete black, while every ordinary channel on board went deaf. I kept counting, because counting was the only thing I had. At minute 4, the silver lines on the planet began to move. Not across the surface. Through it. Like light under skin. At minute 7, something answered from inside the station. I felt it through the array ladder first. A vibration too low for hearing, traveling the frame. Then, along the habitat ring nearest me, windows began lighting one at a time, in a pattern not connected to any residential cycle I knew. Squares of blue, then dark, then blue again. A signal. Or a pulse, moving through homes and corridors, and decks where people lived under the illusion that systems can be interrupted without being changed. At minute 9, the Helios core came back all at once. Hard light slammed across the station. My visor polarized so fast it hurt. Status strips flashed green, as if nothing had happened. Control came alive in my ear, with 3 overlapping voices, asking for my systems check and reporting a temporary core interruption. I remember staring at the dead planet beneath me and saying, "You are all lying already." Then I finished the ladder in shaking hands and got back inside. By the time I reached interior transit, 17 people had reported memory disturbances. That was the official number at least. 17 residents across rings 1 and 2 who insisted parts of the station were wrong. A medtech on Family Band C swore she had 2 daughters instead of 1, and named the missing child without hesitation. A freight coordinator on Dock North accused his supervisor of moving corridor 18 meters east and sealing a mural that had always been there. A teacher on Habitat Ring 3 demanded to know why admin had removed Sector Violet from public maps when half her students lived there. 2 spouses on Rec Level 5 fought in public because one of them insisted they had been divorced for 4 years, and the other insisted they had never married at all. Admin called it blackout confusion. Then the maps started changing. The first physical anomaly turned up before dusk cycle. A transit stair on Ring 2 ended in a landing that did not correspond to any printed schematic. Clean wall paint, fresh floor markings. A locked access door with a brass plate reading VIOLET-12 in a font too old for current station fabrication. 3 residents and 1 maintenance apprentice swore the landing had always been there. 4 others swore the stairwell had always ended 1 level lower. By night cycle, there were 5 more. A storage room on Drum 1 had become a family kitchen complete with old dishes, ware on the counters, and a wall chart marking 7 years of a child's height in careful pencil lines. Nobody on the current registry recognized the names written there. 2 elderly residents on Ring 1 burst into tears when shown the room and insisted they had eaten there every winter feast of their married life. They were not married to each other. That was how it started. No blood, no monsters, no screams in the ventilation. Just ordinary people carrying impossible certainty like a fever, while the station very quietly began making room for what they remembered. The next day, I went to admin and asked for the Helios blackout log. They gave me the public report instead. Temporary synchronization fault between mirror petals and spine distribution channels. No evidence of external stimulus. No compromise to civilian integrity. Memory irregularities under review. I asked for the raw telemetry. The clerk smiled with the dead politeness people learn in bureaucracies and told me exterior systems data had been scrubbed during the outage. Scrubbed. Interesting word. I asked who ordered it. She looked at the screen, not at me. No order attached. I signed out, went back to my locker, and took Nolan's notebook home. That evening, when the station entered dusk, I found an extra page in the notebook in my own handwriting. I know how absurd that sounds. It was my writing, my slant, my broken capital R, the way I indent too far on the left margin when I'm tired. The page sat between notes I had made the month before about coolant drift in the mirror petals, and a list Nolan wrote 6 years earlier of names he thought the station was thinning out of public records. The new page read, "If Violet appears again, do not follow the children. The sun is not a light source. It is a lens. You already failed once." I stared at that until my kitchen light dimmed for night cycle. There are moments when fear still feels like a thing happening to you. Then there are moments when it becomes architecture. Walls, air, gravity. That page changed the shape of the room I was sitting in. I had not written it, but I would have. That was the problem. I began carrying Nolan's notebook on my body after that. 2 days after the blackout, Sector Violet appeared on the station map. Not as an alert, not as an addendum. It had always been there, according to the public interface. Residential and education support band, Ring 2 inward corridor, occupancy 3,114, utility load consistent across 12 years, maintenance requests going back a decade, one filed in my own name 18 months ago concerning conduit wear under Violet 12 stair access. I checked my paper route logs. No Violet, not one mention. I went looking anyway. There are wrong places on stations the way there are wrong houses in dreams. You know them before you know why. Corridor lighting too warm. Acoustic dampening just a fraction off. Air carrying a smell your memory can't place. Violet began at the end of a school deck I had crossed hundreds of times without ever seeing an access split in the wall. Now, there it was. A broad arch marked with the same old brass lettering as the stair landing. Beyond it, a corridor painted in faded indigo. Ceiling panels older than current manufacture. Benches worn by use. Doors with children's drawings taped to them beneath clear sealant yellowed by years. It looked lived in, not newly fabricated, not like an insertion. Worse, it looked historical. A little girl ran past me, carrying a ring ball under one arm. Ordinary as weather. Behind her came a woman I recognized from Med Transit, one of the 17 memory affected, calling after her with tired affection. The woman stopped when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked. I asked how long she had lived in Violet. She frowned, not offended, only confused. Since before my transfer to pediatric triage. 7 years. I asked whether Violet had been sealed during the blackout. She gave me the kind of look adults reserve for the gently damaged. Why would it be sealed? Then she added, "You repaired our kitchen circulation fan last winter." She meant it, no hesitation. I had never seen her before the blackout. A man came out of one of the units behind her, carrying a crate of folded thermal cloths. He nodded at me with the vague familiarity of a neighbor and said, "You still owe me a handrail bracket veil." I had no idea who he was, but somewhere in the station registry, in a map or maintenance stack rewritten after those 9 minutes, there was probably a perfect record of me owing him exactly that. I left Violet fast enough to be rude. At the first public terminal outside the arch, I pulled up my work history. There it was. 3 logged maintenance visits to Violet Band over the last 2 years. Signed in my name. Verified with my access tag. One of the signatures was mine. Or the station's version of it. I felt sick enough to sit on the floor. When I got back to my unit, the page in Nolan's notebook had changed. Only one line this time. Written below the others in the same impossible hand. Do not trust records created in the light. That was the point where I stopped trying to solve an administrative anomaly and started treating the station like a crime scene. There was one person I still trusted enough to say any of this out loud to. Her name was Sierra Quill. Dockside mechanic, occasional smuggler, permanent disciplinary problem, and the only person on Station 9 who ever read Nolan's disappearance the same way I did, with anger instead of embarrassment. We had history in the untidy way adults in confined habitats often do. 1 bad year, 2 almost good ones. Then distance, because wanting too much from one another or on a station makes life mechanically difficult. She listened without interrupting while I laid the notebook, the copied work history, and a paper map of Ring 2 across her tool bench. When I was done, she lit a welding strip, thought about it, then put it out again. You ever notice, she said, that every official sunrise on this place takes 8.7 seconds too long? That was not the answer I expected. No. I did. About 3 years ago. Thought the mirror petals were lagging. They weren't. The station smooths dawn. Adds a transition where there shouldn't be one. So maybe we don't get the real light cycles. Maybe we get edited ones. That word again. I asked her whether she remembered Violet. She went still for 1 dangerous second. Not before the blackout, she said. After. I think I've been there my whole life. She said it calmly, which was worse. You think. She rubbed both thumbs against a grease rag, as if checking they still belonged to her. I know I haven't, she said, but I also know where the vending alcove is, what the school wall smells like after maintenance foam cures, and which unit has the cracked skylamp panel. Both sets of memory fit. That should not be possible. I asked why she hadn't reported it. She almost smiled. To admin, so they can reassure me into a file? That was when I realized the official 17 was nonsense. There were more. Many more. Most had simply learned the oldest station lesson. If a system starts revising reality around you, the first defense is silence. Sarah helped me get into Helios maintenance records that night. Not the public layer, the old infrastructure stack buried under 3 generations of interface updates and access controls. We came in through a dockside relay spool Sarah had been stealing power from for years because official rationing on her sector never quite matched official promises. The Helios blackout file existed. It was marked as an archived event from 21 years earlier. Same duration, same core state, same station-wide blindness across all public channels, same white handshake status, same memory irregularities. No one alive ever mentioned a blackout 21 years ago. No station memorial, no medical history, no review notices, nothing in public records. But there it was, in raw engineering shorthand, Helios alignment event. 0 hours, 9 minutes, 13 seconds. Surface relay lock acquired. Civilian drift within tolerances. Narrative patch deployed. I read the last line 3 times. Narrative patch. Not medical support. Not public reassurance. Narrative. Sarah found the linked file while I was still trying to understand what kind of man writes that phrase into an engineering system. It was a restricted report from something called continuity oversight. Only fragments remained, enough to sicken. The station had not been built merely to survive orbit over a dead world. It had been built to preserve social continuity over long isolation cycles, using adaptive environmental correction. Light, layout, schedules, public records, domestic allocations, educational tracks. Everything could be tuned to minimize conflict, grief, instability, unrest. That language was ugly enough. Then came the real line. When surface archive lock occurs, station cognition may experience consensual overwrite pressure. Controlled memory integration is preferable to unmanaged fracture. Consensual overwrite pressure, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. That sounds like a machine trying to make possession sound cooperative. The second blackout had not been unprecedented. It had been a repeat, and according to the system, the first time the station responded by patching reality into a more manageable story. I thought of Nolan, of how cleanly he had vanished from public memory, of how his wife's face had looked almost correct around the absence. Maybe he had not been deleted because of what he found. Maybe he had been standing in the wrong place between 2 stories, and the station chose the simpler one. We kept digging until morning shift. The surface relay lock originated not in the Helios core itself, but through something below orbit called the Mnemosyne grid. No active public files described it. An old survey image showed a vast circular installation buried under the ash world's equatorial crust, directly beneath the station's orbit track. Ancient, pre-colonial, impossible in scale. The original mission planners had identified it as a light-responsive data architecture of unknown origin. Data architecture. For all our years above that dead planet, for all our mining scans and orbital studies, the station had been flying over a buried memory machine. Helios was not only an artificial sun, it was a reader. During the blackout 21 years ago, and again during this one, the station's light system had linked with the surface grid and pulled something back. Not a message, a version. A stored consensus of lives, sectors, relationships, domestic patterns, maybe even whole populations from a prior orbital civilization, or a first station iteration we never knew existed. A memory structure large enough to press against the minds of everyone aboard and ask to be made real. The continuity patch had contained it once. This time, it was failing. That was my theory by sunrise. Then I found my own death certificate. It was in my personnel cache, hidden under a corrupted redundancy folder, whose timestamp it also matched the first blackout. Rowan Vale, exterior maintenance fatality during unsanctioned EVA, body unrecovered. 8 months after the first 9-minute event, I was sitting right there reading it. Sarah took the tablet out of my hand before I dropped it. There was a linked follow-up document. Replacement identity stabilized. Retain low social load occupational profile. Sibling contamination unresolved. I do not know what expression my face made then. I only know Sarah stopped touching my arm very carefully, as if I might come apart at the wrong pressure. Replacement identity. There are 1,000 terrifying possibilities in the universe. Very few of them contain your own name in language designed for logistics. Maybe I had died 20 years ago, and the station had rebuilt me out of records, habit, and acceptable function. Maybe I was always a patch, an inserted continuity solution, carrying enough of an original to pass. Maybe the document was about another Rowan Vale, and the station had simply folded us together for efficiency. Maybe. Horror loves maybe, because maybe keeps the floor soft under every step. I did the only useful thing then. I checked Nolan's notebook. The impossible handwriting had filled 2 more pages. You are not the original. That is not the worst part. The first patch held because Helios was weaker then. If the sun locks again, Violet becomes primary, and the rest follows. Break the lens. Do not let it see the surface during eclipse. Eclipse. I looked at the orbital chart. Vesta Minor's debris halo crossed between the station and Helios in 8 hours. A partial occlusion event. Routine. But if the surface grid used the artificial sun as a reader, then an eclipse geometry might strengthen the lock. A third event. A full overwrite. Admin was already moving, though quietly. Sector doors sealed around Violet. Med teams escorted the visibly memory-affected away for rest stabilization. The public boards began shifting language. Not blackout confusion anymore. Integration, stress, historical continuity, realignment. The station was learning how to describe the infection in terms mild enough to continue being obeyed. We needed to get to the Helios core. Not the public control ring, the lens spine itself, the rotating optical heart where the station's artificial day was split, softened and aimed. Sarah had a route through service launch to a raw access. I had maintenance clearance enough to get us inside, if the system still accepted my badge as belonging to something more than a replacement line item. We were almost caught leaving dockside by a security detail, escorting 6 children in school uniforms toward Violet. Calm children, carrying packs. One of them looked at me and said politely, "You don't belong in this version." I asked where they were going. "Home," she said. The guard beside her did not react as though that answer was strange. We made the outer spine by transit tube, then climbed under Helios in microgravity while the station rotated beneath us in indifferent silence. Outside, the ash world rolled through eclipse shadow. The silver equatorial lines I had seen during the blackout were visible now even in daylight, faint under the clouds. Halfway up the access truss, Sarah found a maintenance plaque bolted beneath a panel seam. Old metal. Pre-current station finish. It read, Station Violet. Helios Distribution, Node B. Station Violet. Not a sector. A whole station. Something that had existed before 9, or beneath 9, or as one of several narrative layers the continuity system had access to when pressure from the surface grid became too strong. All at once, the awful shape of it came clear. The station had not only patched memories after the first event, it had chosen which station to keep. 9 had won last time. Violet had been suppressed, compressed into fragments, ghosts in wrong memories, impossible sectors, old plaques under new paint. Now Violet was coming back, not as an invader, as a buried version, insisting it had always been the truth. The Helios core sat open above us, like a mechanical flower, the size of a district. Mirror petals turning. lens channels glowing. At the center, suspended in a cage of armored struts, was the focal body itself, a dark crystal sphere wrapped in light. No one had ever told maintenance what the focal body actually was. We calibrated around it, cooled it, aligned it, but did not ask what material could ingest enough energy to fake a sun for millions. Now I knew. It was not a light source. It was an interface. The control platform already had people on it when we arrived. Admin personnel, 2 security officers, a continuity engineer in old grey insignia I had only seen in archival images, and standing at the console with his hand on the lock controls. Nolan. I do not write that lightly. My brother, older than when he vanished, or maybe simply worn in ways memory had not preserved. Same scar at the chin from a childhood fall. Same left shoulder tilt. So am I's, except now they looked at me with the exhausted pity of a man forced to repeat himself to a child. Sarah saw my face and went for the rail. The guards raised their shock carbines. Nolan lifted one hand, and they stopped. "Rowan," he said, as if we'd been separated by bad scheduling, rather than 6 years of impossible absence. I asked whether he was real. He almost laughed. More than most things here. That answer made sense in exactly the wrong way. He told me he had worked continuity after the first event, that he had discovered what the station really did, that Nine and Violet were both human-built orbital habitats layered across the same structural frame over different epochs of collapse and managed through Helios as a continuity engine. When the surface grid locked, it did not transmit lies. It transmitted preserved civic memory from prior iterations, whole social arrangements stored in light-responsive architecture on the planet below. We were never the first survivors, he said, just the latest edit. The first 9-minute event had nearly overwritten 9 with Violet. Continuity patched it by selecting the version with higher stability scores, lower unrest, better long-cycle metrics. People who did not fit the winning narrative were thinned, reassigned, or dissolved into more useful roles. "Dissolved?" I said. His expression did not change. "You think the station killed us because it hated us," he said. "It killed us because coherence costs space." I asked if he had died. He took too long answering. "Not in the way you mean." The eclipse shadow reached the Helios petals then. Light shifted. The focal sphere darkened from gold to black glass. On the console behind him, a surface lock countdown began. Violet consensus pressure. Rising. Primary narrative instability. Patch recommendation. Full integration. That was the station's euphemism for surrender. Nolan stepped toward me. "I kept you," he said quietly. "Both times. Both times." There are revelations so large they stop behaving like information. They become weather you are suddenly standing inside. If he told the truth, then I had already been overwritten once, maybe rebuilt from enough surviving pattern to keep functioning. Nolan had pulled me forward through one winning narrative and was prepared to do it again. "Come with me," he said. "Nine is already losing. Violet has room for you." Room. Like a kinder word could hide the machinery underneath it. Sarah moved first. Not dramatic, just practical. She kicked the platform lock release and sent one guard drifting sideways in low gravity, then drove her shoulder into the second before he could fire. I went for the console. Nolan caught my wrist with strength I did not remember him having. "Rowan," he said, And for 1 second, he sounded exactly like my brother had when we were boys. And I was about to do something stupid off a maintenance stack because I thought fear counted as weakness. The original "you" is gone. I can still save this one. Maybe he meant it. That was the cruel part. I believed he meant it. Then I saw the console update as the eclipse deepened. Sector maps along the inner rings shifted. Violet expanding. 9 compressing. Family registries rewriting in live feed. Occupancy lines replacing names with placeholders during transition. 100,000 lives being resorted in clean columns by a machine that called it integration because extermination sounded untidy in engineering language. Oh, I broke his fingers. I wish there were a nobler sentence there. There isn't. He let go with a sound I had never heard from him. Sarah got a carbine loose. The first shot hit the lens frame, not a person, and sent sparks across the platform. Security returned fire. Low gravity turned everything ugly and slow. One body spinning, one panel rupturing. Helios glare flaring black-white as the focal body began its lock. I got to the manual alignment arm and hauled. The lens petals were designed to track by degrees. Maintenance could force a misalignment in emergency if the focal body threatened to overheat. The arm fought like I was trying to turn a city by hand. Maybe I was. Behind me, Nolan shouted something I did not catch over the alarm shift. Sierra fired twice more. A guard hit the rail and went over, tether catching him 6 meters down. The eclipse line crossed the final petal. On the surface below, the silver equatorial grid came fully alive. The focal body went transparent. Inside it, I saw. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but plainly. City lights, another station. Another world of corridors and schools and kitchens and parks, held in light. Violet, or one memory of it, pressing upward through Helios into us. The manual arm clicked 1 notch. That was enough. The lock missed true alignment by less than a degree. The platform shook. Helios vented raw glare. Every screen around us bloomed static. The console dropped from full integration to partial bleed, and then to unresolved conflict. Not victory, just damage. The kind of damage big systems hate most. Nolan slammed into me from the side, and we hit the rail together. The last thing I expected in that moment was grief to arrive ahead of anger. But when I looked at him, really looked, I saw not a villain or a ghost, but a man who had spent years choosing which reality killed fewer people, and no longer understood the difference between mercy and editing. "You don't get to pick," I told him. His eyes moved past me to the focal body, to the partial misalignment, to the failure of clean integration. "You already live inside a pick," he said. Then the emergency shutters dropped between us. That saved my life. Maybe his too. The rest happened in pieces. Helios dumped half its stored charge into space. The eclipse passed. The surface grid's lock degraded. Station-wide emergency protocols triggered decompression seals around 2 habitat intersections and fried a section of Violet clear out of the inner ring. I know because later I saw the damage from outside. A ragged wound in the station's skin where a sector that had existed for a day, or for decades, depending on which story you trusted, had blown into vacuum. Sarah and I made it back through array access, with my left arm numb from current burn, and her shoulder dislocated. Behind us, the station fell into emergency night. Not total dark this time. Patchy, dark, Wrong dark. The kind you get when a machine can no longer decide which districts belong to which world. Publicly, admin called it a stabilization event. Unofficially, people woke to find Violet half gone, half still there. Some families remained intact from its memory. Others vanished. Teachers lost classrooms they had graded in the day before. Parents forgot children and then remembered them again by evening. Whole corridors reverted to 9, while carrying fixtures from Violet like bones under new skin. It was not a clean save. That's the truth. I did not preserve the station. I broke its ability to choose quickly. Maybe that was the best anyone could do. Sarah got a packet out through dockside before continuity sealed long band transmission. Raw files, Helios logs, surface grid images, the plaque from the core, Nolan's existence, my death certificate, everything. Maybe some relay caught it. Maybe the packet is still crossing dark somewhere no one will ever answer. Maybe another station will see it and turn its own sun blind before orbiting too close to memory. Nolan disappeared again after the Helios incident. No registry, no body, no trace except one thing. 3 days later, I found Nolan's notebook lying on my bunk. Not his original. A second one. Same cheap paper stock. Same habit of writing on the back cover when he ran out of room. Inside, on the first page, in his hand this time, not mine, were 7 words. You bought time. Do not waste it. That was 18 days ago. Station 9 still runs. Sunrise still comes 8.7 seconds too slowly. Violet still appears in places. A school wall visible through a sealed service grate. An old woman on ring 3 calling for a husband none of her neighbors remember. A transit line listing stops in 2 different orders depending on which car you board. Children drawing a second station around the first one like a halo. Admin says the situation is under control. That is the sentence most likely to get you killed on any station ever built. So hear me carefully. Station 9 is not haunted. It is contested. The dead planet below us stores more than ruins. The light systems aboard this station do more than illuminate, and the people you love may already belong partly to a version of the world that lost the last argument and is preparing for another chance. If Helios goes dark again for any reason, system fault, eclipse, sabotage, routine interruption, whatever term the notices choose, do not stay under the public sky panels. Do not follow anyone into a corridor you do not remember from paper. Do not accept reassurance from a terminal that suddenly knows your private grief in comforting language. And if someone you thought was gone steps out of a sector that shouldn't exist and asks you to come home, ask which station they mean, because by the time the light comes back, home may only be the story that won.